come on. Hey, feel the rhythm. It's getting from the deepest of your soul. Now, use your senses, and everything will be easier than before. Keep on moving, funk is coming. Blind yourself, big. You'll become the star in this die. Spread your wings, fly to me. Funk is coming. Okay, let's do this. We start recording now. There we go.
Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like we haven't talked for about 10 minutes before. Yeah. So, what the fuck have you been, man?
So I've been pretty active. I just have, obviously Google Plus went away, and then, but I've been active on, on Facebook and groups and things like that. So just in terms of my life, like the last up until December, the last 3 years were up in Toronto. I actually saw Ozzy a couple times, hung out with him, and because he's up in Canada, so I was up there working, and then now I just returned in December to the LA area, and I'm working from here now. And then, so like work-wise, I went from feature animation into doing visual effects, like live-action visual effects work for episodic series and films and stuff. And I'm still working in that capacity. I'm the head of CG at a studio in Toronto, working remotely from Los Angeles.
Nice.
And
you say
thank you,
working remotely, yeah.
Anyone who sees this from my work, who sees you say that, it's going to go like, oh no, he's working.
No, listen, I have no doubts about that, but yeah. It's just coming from.
It is tempting.
It is coming from the same approach,
Right.
even if you. So at least in my case, especially with COVID and stuff like that, I try to do a lot of stuff remotely for my customers.
Yeah.
And even if at the end of the day you probably clock way more hours than go in the office, stuff like that, just the fact that you wake up and your work commute is literally 35 seconds, it's fantastic. It doesn't look like you work.
That's great, but I'm also on East Coast time for my work because I want to be on when my team's on. So right. I'm up at like 5 a.m. every morning, and then on camera by 6, and then I can let off work around 3:30 or 4, somewhere in that area, and then I'll go for a nice walk or whatever. But that schedule change was pretty rough, I gotta say. Like, I don't like getting up that early. I miss having a little buffer there where I can kind of wake up at like 7 and kind of stumble around for a couple hours before I actually have to think about anything. So yeah. So anyway, in terms of like work and life wise, that was all going on, and my wife was in LA, and she would come up, for long periods, and then kind of when it was cold or whatever, she would go back down to LA, and my son came up and worked a summer with me, and so the last 3 or 4 years I've been doing visual effects work and kind of moving around. But in terms of engagement in the community, or like arguing, debating, or discussing religion or politics or whatever, I'm pretty active still. I'm in Noah Adam, or Veritas, whatever his name was, the Christian who converted years ago, or deconverted, I should say, who I interviewed on my channel. He was a popular, I don't know if you know, I think it's Veritas 42 or something like that. He was a popular Christian. He engaged with Scott Clifton a whole bunch of theoretical bullshit. And then he ended up going away for like a year or two, and he came back, and he had kind of left Christianity and everything. He's a great guy. I've actually been in his, he has a little Facebook group that is kind of a small group of close friends, and we're in there arguing, or not arguing, but sharing thoughts and whatnot. We'll do hangouts every once in a while. Hang out with Ozzy, I chat with Ozzy probably every probably every 3 months, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a little longer. And enjoy talking to him. Super, we're still super
I,
close.
I spoke with Ozzy about doing one of those things. He actually gave me the weirdest excuse ever, and I mean
Is
I
it that
don't.
he's working? Because he's actually like really
No,
involved in
no, no,
it.
no. It's okay. So I just say it because it's funny because that was probably conversation. I don't think he has any problems with that. And by the way, I will try to go back at him because, but it was really weird because he said, I told him, yeah, I mean, do this kind of things like 40, 45 minutes, 1 hour, stuff like that. Not longer because people, they don't fucking care.
Yeah.
And he said, and I was so blown away. He said, "Okay, yeah, fine." He said, "You know what? I got an issue with that because I'm really verbose, and I don't think I can stick everything in 1 hour." And I was like,
He's not going to
"Listen,
get through his introduction.
man, okay, listen, I gotta give it to the guy. That is so straightforward and honest that it can only be the truth, and I
Oh,
appreciate that. So yeah, so I'm thinking about going back at him and saying, listen, man, we can do a 2-part series with you. We can accommodate that. We can work out of that. Yeah, but it is fantastic. But yeah, I'll go back at him. So there is a question I want to ask you. Is about something that you just said. You're obviously a big family man. I mean, I can say from your avatar, things you do on Facebook. It's all you, your family, your kids. I don't know how the fuck you do that, but you do. How does this affect your arguments and approach to these kind of discussions? Because and we had this kind of conversation, I think, with John McDroppelt, not too long ago. There is a baggage that we bring in the discussion. Either the arguments that we feel like, but also the way we approach those arguments are different because of your culture, your experience, what you value, stuff like that. So, in what way being a family man works the way through how you approach these things?
I mean, like, yeah, I think I get what you're after. Is like how like even in terms of how it shapes my thinking or like
Right.
how what topics may be important to me, I guess. Because
Mm-hmm.
obviously well, not obviously, my kids are all post college. So they've all graduated college now. They're all out kind of in the workforce. My son teaches computer science. I got another one that's a programmer up in the Bay Area, and then my daughter's artist in LA. And we I'd say that well, number one is that and this is kind of tangential to your question, is that, but I was just talking to my wife about it yesterday, is that what's become, now this is really kind of off topic from what you said, but I think it's interesting, is that
Mm-hmm.
as I shared with my wife that I have to, this really doesn't touch on your topic at all, other than it involves my family. My now when we have a family kind of group chat in Facebook Messenger or whatever, where we kind of share thoughts or whatever.
Right.
And my kids now will, when I offer a point of view or something, they'll oftentimes come back, kind of pushing back on it and going, no, I don't think that's true. I think this is the case. And then they'll kind of throw out some reasons or whatever. And I've realized that my propensity as a parent, or my tendency as a parent, is to kind of bristle at being kind of corrected by my children, or having them put forward good arguments. I have to really be careful that I don't get put off by them correcting me, or arguing back or whatever. Because I think you're used to them just kind of falling in line or whatever, and then there's this weird period where they get into high school where they're pushing back, but maybe their reasons aren't great or whatever. But now that they're full-fledged adults, they're making points that are serious points that I'm like, oh fuck, maybe I got to think differently about that, or I need to, and it's just, you have to humble yourself a little bit and be
Yeah.
willing to be corrected by your children, and that they're not children anymore. They've got, developed points of view and good reasons that they've heard from other sources beyond you, or from their, my daughter's pretty involved in politics and social issues, and helping. She does work with the homeless, and as kind of volunteer thing, and gets involved in political causes and things like that. And so she's done her research, has a lot of knowledge or whatever, and I have to kind of be okay with that. In terms of like how it affects my arguments or things like that, I suppose that it kind of being a father definitely shaped my like my own kind of social skills, interacting with people, and making persuasion. You learn how to be persuasive to your kids, or how to present an argument to your kids in a way that's palatable, or that they don't know that you're presenting. And I don't mean like a formal argument or like talking about God talk or whatever, but I mean just like, hey, I need this person to do this thing for me. Well, how am I going to persuade them that that's in their best interest, or that they need to think that way too, or whatever, right? So
I think it's a kind of a thing that we all go through, especially when the kids grow old. And I mean, I can really relate to what you said. I remember my wife telling me, like 20 years ago, that I was seeing things too much in black and white. It was either right or wrong, true or false, stuff like that. And I feel that, I mean, my two kids are 26 and 28. They're both working, they got girlfriends, and I've noticed myself that everything is a little bit more in a gray shade than black and white, because you have got to accommodate for things that, I mean, you don't want to fight with your kids. You might be okay fighting with some, moron on the internet, but your kids is a different thing, so I get what you say. Is it what you're trying to say? Is it is it the same experience for you?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think it's really just like not, I think the gut instinct is kind of to bristle, or to like, why do they always fight me on that or whatever? But it's just maybe I wouldn't have that same reaction if it was a friend who I was out for a walk with, who like, oh, I don't know if that's true, and like said this, I wouldn't bristle in the same way or whatever. It's just that I have to get over my being a parent and and treat them as if they're offering serious views, and and I have to be open to them and forget that it's my kid, to some degree.
They force you to pose in a way that a stranger or even a friend would not do, and that eventually trickles down all your other exchanges. So yeah, and talking about that. Again, this is going to be the tangential thing. I'm trying to knit, the next argument to what we just said.
Sure.
One of the things I told you I would have loved to have your point of view about is because, and we spoke about Ozzy before. Years ago, I remember I saw an hangout between Ozzy and Jim Gardner.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, the funny thing was that Ozzy had no idea that Jim Gardner was putting that on air. So yeah.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, he got to a point and said, "Oh, hold on a second. Is this on air?" I said, "Yeah. Okay, yeah, cool." So basically, Jim Gardner approached Ozzy because he couldn't square a spiritual approach to life, the feeling that there is something greater, might be friendship or stuff like that, with the fact of being an atheist. And it was really struggling with that. And I mean, it is not easy to square. I can see that, especially, again, if we come from, and this is where I'm trying to, to knit the argument, especially if you come from an approach of black and white, true or false, spirituality or natural world, stuff like that. So, what is your? I mean, what do you think about that? Because it's not an easy task, even if you think about it. So, I'm really interested in what's your idea about.
Let me pare back to what you said, so that way I make sure I got you straight. Is it just in terms of like, I mean, you hear not Ben Stiller, Sam Harris, or you hear people talk about spirituality and try to fold that into like kind of an atheistic viewpoint, and that's kind of where you're going, right? Is like, how do I do that?
Yeah.
How do I? Yeah, and I guess what I'd say is that, I think the way, so I'm very, I think I've shared this with Ozzy. I'm very hesitant to talk about things beyond my ability to speak, like in terms of like I know how to make coffee, right? And I know how to hang out with you and chat and everything, and I have all of these experiences that then I know like how to fix my audio, or I know how to like I have all these inferences that I can kind of leverage because I have past experiences that I know other audio programs, and I can work out my Skype audio or whatever. Like there, but like when you're talking about the spiritual realm, like I don't have those relevant experiences. Other than that, I do have like experiences that I feel like elevate me out of kind of the mundane, or and have a deep connection to my emotions and to my thoughts of the world. And when I smoke weed, I'll get I'll start to see the world quite differently, and I'll have
Right.
pseudo spiritual interactions where like I'm looking at Ernie, and I'm telling you I'm perceiving him differently than when I'm not high, right?
Yeah.
As an example. And the that to me, like, there's a depth to my experience that I don't get when I'm sober. Let's call not being high sober.
Yeah.
When I'm sober, like I don't have that kind of, I'm not having those experiences. So for me, has a trans.
Holy crap. Oh boy. Hold on a second. It's gonna be a reconnection soon. There you go.
What the heck happened?
I have no fucking idea, man. I mean, the guy with the chainsaw started again, but I don't think he cut any wire. So
hold on. Why is my all of a sudden my camera? Are you seeing me okay?
no, I see the avatar. I mean, we can go like that and fix it later. I don't know. It's up to you.
Sure. We can. I'll do it while I'm on. Okay, actually, just give me 1 second.
Yeah.
My camera. Video. Sure. So this is good. Oh, you know what? I think it's because I like audio called you. Here, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah. Able to see me now, and then
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Cool. Before it was nice. We were kind of side by side, and now you're too big for me.
Oh no, it's because there is it's like
it's not the first time you've heard that.
No, it's like the beta thing about Skype. There is a way to but I see you big and small, so it's fine on my side.
Okay. So I think that I have experiences that are beyond my kind of ordinary experience. Like my 90% of my day isn't or 95% of my day is very much similar in terms of my experiences and things like that. But then I'll have deep thoughts, or I'll have like kind of meditative states, or I'll be listening to some music, and everything will kind of coordinate, and all of a sudden I'll have kind of this really like overwhelming feeling of the richness of life, or of beauty, or of other things, right? And I think for me, those are, I think those are akin to what people would term spiritual experiences. But when people want to quantify that as being something extra, like supernatural, or like beyond natural explanation, or beyond the scope of what the universe, kind of the raw universe, can provide to me, I kind of reject that. I don't have good warrant to say that those things aren't just part of existing, and that. So I guess what I'd say is that, like, I empathize with Jim Gardner. I haven't hung out with Jim before, but I had watched his interactions. He had a lot of really interesting interactions, because he was he and I don't know how he is now, but like at the time, he was a guy who seemed a little confused, or not confused, but like had a lot of complexity to how he was thinking, and was having trouble kind of reconciling different aspects of his life, and was very frank about that. I really appreciated that. And I think I'm basically with Ozzy in that, like, and I don't want to speak for Ozzy, but we chat all the time, and I think I am this even goes, I mean, let's just say we were talking about God. I don't it's not that I couldn't imagine that there is something beyond, that there's things beyond, like at other levels within the universe, or within reality, or whatever. I wouldn't be surprised that there's things that are beyond my ability to
Right.
to think about, or to conceive, or whatever. but so I don't have so much trouble with the concept of. I have trouble with some people's concepts of God, but like the idea of something bigger or something, I have no clue. I can't speak to that. So I don't. It's not that I reject that.
Right.
That's not a possibility. It's that I reject that you have anything to say about it, like or anyone else, because I haven't yet heard a good reason to think it the case that doesn't find better explanation in other ways, and so I'd say that for this, it's more that I'm going to maintain a healthy skepticism about the spirituality, and I'm going to hold back from saying that it's something beyond natural explanation or beyond the physics or the substrate of the universe or whatever to provide those experiences. I'm not going to say it's supernatural, like so as if it's like provided by some other material somewhere outside of the physical reality. I just don't have warrant to say it. So it's not that it couldn't be the case, but I don't have any reason to think it is the case either. So I just don't.
Okay, but okay, I understand, and this is good because it's a good segue to my next question. You were known, I mean, when you were way more engaged in this kind of conversation, discussions, debates, whatever the hell in me, and it's not me trying to to pay lip service to you, but you were quite a powerhouse, in dealing with complex arguments, not on a shallow level. I mean, you went pretty deep in there. How do you value personal experience?
Well, from my own personal experience, I value it quite a bit.
There you go.
You don't really have a choice in the matter to some degree. Like if I think I saw something, and I think you try to. So I would say that I value personal experience because that's the way I get data about the world. So I trust. There's some things I have no. We've talked about this a bunch, or within the community we talked about it a bunch about like. I have to trust my own memories.
Right.
Like now I can be skeptical as to what, like, I know my memory is getting more and more flawed. I know that down the road I may be susceptible to dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever. So there's going to become a point where it's going to be healthy for me to be open to hearing that my memory is mistaken. And I need to kind of cultivate some humility there. And I'm actively working on this because I do have Alzheimer's in my family, and I have seen members of my family go through it and reject that they're having the issue, or that they push back, and I think it actually makes harder for the caretakers and everyone. And so before I get to that point, I'm really trying to cultivate this attitude of being okay with the fact that I'm going to have to rely on others, and that I'm not going to be able to trust my own experiences, and I'm going to have to defer to them sometimes when they tell me, no, it's not as I remember it. And that's a hard thing to do, to like operate kind of in skepticism of your own memory all the time. You kind of have to rely on it most of the time, and you have to just kind of confidently rely on it because you have to act. You have to be able to act. So I think I value personal experience, and I understand why someone tells me, I think most Christians are Christians because of a personal experience that they had, or a series of personal experiences.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think it's the arguments or anything, right? Like I don't think that no one looks at the Kalam cosmological argument and goes, oh, okay, well, I'm going to believe in God now. No, they're going to have like some experience they can't explain.
Yeah.
They're going to feel that there is some something that was pointing it to it being supernatural or whatever, and they're going to believe in the supernatural as a result. And that was the hard part for me as a Christian leaving Christianity, is I had to, I was looking at I believed the Bible was inerrant. I was pretty much a kind of a fundamentalist Calvinist quality, and had very believed God's word was God breathed and was. But then, as I started having problems, I started realizing that there are real issues with the accuracy of this relative to observations, that we're making about the world. And I started to have skepticism there. On the other hand, I'm going, but today I prayed to Jesus, and I felt like, like that he was engaged in my daily life. Like evangelicals in America believe that God is currently active in their lives and doing things like moment to moment, that when they're late for a meeting, that it's for a reason, right? And that like God is that God is working through them to kind of engineer this path for their life where it all kind of has purpose and meaning. And so when you then say, yeah, but look at the text and look what it says, and then look at these physical facts, and how do you pair those up? And they go, I don't know anything about that, but I know I talked to Jesus this morning, right?
Right, right. No, you're right. I mean, and this is a follow-up, to that line of questioning, is that, I often found that sometimes, well, I mean, of course, if two people are talking about an argument, they talk about the argument. That's it. The argument is the topic, and we get to it. But every so often, the conversation happened between two different. Oh, man, I don't want to use the word worldview because I despise it with all my will.
Your set of beliefs or whatever.
Yeah, right. Okay, two different set of beliefs. Yeah, I like that better. So if there is a conversation between an argument, it's the argument. That's it. It's settled. We talk about that. But when two persons are talking, you cannot really take away each other's personal experience. That has to be taken into the account of the conversation. And my personal feeling was that, when this conversation were way more, active and stuff like that, the whole thing was getting a little bit too dry for my taste.
Yeah.
Trying to extrapolate an argument from thing. I mean, it left me. Yeah, okay, man. I understood the kalam. Okay, I get it. I have no fucking idea how that person got to a different conclusion than mine. Because I mean, the data is there for the both of us. So it's either the fact that it is true for me and true for the other guy, which, I mean, obviously can't be, or there is a gray area where culture, politics, the way you've been, raised, stuff like that, just plays an important role.
Yeah.
Do you share the same feeling that maybe we went a little bit too far in the conversation in dealing only with the argument?
Yeah, well, the thing is that arguing over somebody's personal experience is really tough, right? Like, ultimately it comes down to like you're disagreeing with their interpretation of what they experienced. Like your opinion is that like, well, no, you might have experienced something, but it wasn't caused by what you think it was. It was caused by this, or So those are pretty short-lived. And so yeah, I agree with you that like we were, like how many times did we argue about the kalam or whatever? But like nobody that's like an academic exercise. It's not it's not persuasive to anyone. It doesn't really get at what people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. It's kind of easy to argue about that stuff because it has no stake. Like there's nobody's life is going to be ruined by like getting a beating in the kalam cosmological argument or whatever. It's not like people don't really rely on that to bolster their confidence or I don't think so. I think like their personal experience, how they're raised, what their current situation is. I think it's a lot of tribalism and like community. You hear people talking about the community, and I think it's really important. I don't think that they're it is kind of a side, but like when I went to Germany and I hung out with some friends who a husband and wife who were both East Germans before the wall came down. They talked about how in East Germany when they were in their teens, like probably around like 18 or 20 when the wall came down, and they talked about how they had their community had events and had kind of civic like there was like a coming of age celebration for kids in the village or in the neighborhood, and it was basically a secular replacement for a lot of what churches do in places. They didn't have kind of the church. It was not East Germany was not heavily religious. It was Russian communism that had kind of worked into that area, and so they had they were creating these experiences or these things because they didn't have all that support. And I think like I don't know that like the atheist community has like good communal qualities or whatever. I think you have to kind of go find that stuff elsewhere. I don't think it's but I think people get that from their churches, right? Like there's a nice thing about ritual. There's a nice thing about going every Sunday. about seeing these people you're really close with. They can really trust in each other because they have these kind of shared experiences and shared values, and they politically are similarly minded. They grew up in the same area or whatever. So there's this whole structure that, like, when you're trying to persuade somebody away from not only their conception of God, but like all that other stuff that they've got going on in their life. That's really, like, it was really traumatic for me to walk away from. So I don't know that, like, people are going to be apt to change because they hear a good Kalam argument or something, or an argument against the Kalam, right?
No, but I totally agree with you. And I mean, we have kind of the same experience around here in Italy, funnily enough, because, there are some areas historically, I'm talking about, the 60s and 70s, which were, more communist oriented. I mean, real communist, right? And some other which were more, church oriented. Now, the funny thing was that if you went in those areas, in small villages, you had a point of aggregation, and they were called the house of the people. It was basically a bar, where everybody could gather and discuss about politics and stuff like that. And that happened, in the communist part of Italy. In the other parts, it was the church. People gather around after that. So what I think what I'm trying to say is that I totally get what you say, but I also think that those kind of aggregation, they happen if there is some kind of ideology. And I'm using ideology in the best possible way. I know it's a bad word for some people, but there must be something which ties them. And this, I think, is one of the biggest problems with the atheist community. They tried to do something like that without an ideology, because I mean, atheism is not a fucking ideology. So we see a lot of I've seen a lot of people trying to do that, but it's literally like herding cats,
I mean, well, like, it is a massive segue, but, like, the whole atheism plus thing was an attempt to get an ideology behind. It was a liberal agenda attached to Christianity, or not attached to atheism, I should say. Where it was like, you're not an atheist if you don't also believe all these other things, or you're not, and there's not, like you said, there's not beliefs that there's definitely things that, that are like, if you don't believe that a God exists, there's a number of things that implies, like you're not going to read into some higher power's influence in your life, or, there's all sorts of, like, implications of that belief. But they're pretty few, and they're pretty, it doesn't give you, like, your moral structure, or doesn't give you a view on the topic of abortion, or it doesn't give you, like some other values out of it. Whereas Christianity brings not only, like, this belief, but it brings all of this other structure, these things, these requisite beliefs that kind of fall out of it or whatever. Atheism doesn't really have it. I don't think it should, but I think, like, when I fell into Google Plus, it was because I had left World of Warcraft. I was active in the World of Warcraft forums. Right. I was active in my guild. I was active in my community. And when I kind of was like, you know what, like, I'm kind of done with this, then, like, that's when I was watching some YouTube videos and got involved in that community, right? Mm-hmm. I just found another community with another set of things to talk about. But it was essentially the same thing I was doing on the World of Warcraft forums, and having arguments about with other people about the best, composition for a raid, for a raid or something, like, different concepts there, right? And having arguments, and so I think that, like, we try to find community, and right now, like, I have certain interests and passions that I'm following. I'm starting to become parts of new communities and stuff, and it's occupying more of my time, and it just brings, like, a social dynamic to it. And I think other people get that through their church and through all those activities and all that. And I did that for a long time. So that's why it was that hard to kind of walk away from.
Yeah, so. I mean, so having established that you can have a community of people which like the Red Sox, but it's almost impossible to have a community of all the people which do not like Red Sox, or they don't know what the Red Sox are. See what I did there?
Exactly. So if you hate Tom Brady and the Patriots, it doesn't tell you what you do like.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. So my next question for you would be, why do you think that such an easy concept didn't work for a lot of people, especially in the US, where they tried to make those community? Was it because
What do
they.
you mean such an easy? Which easy concept? You say?
I mean, the easy concept about people. Okay, there is a community of people which like the Red Sox, and there is no community of people which they do not like the Red Sox.
Yeah.
But people try to do the same, and I mean, some notable atheists try to do that, and I think they fail, more or less. Why do you think they even try to do that? What was it, because they wanted exposure? Was it for political reasons? Because I understand there is a an angle that we haven't explored, and that is very different to U.S. rather than it is in Europe, and that is the political angle. Sometimes you are against the organized, churches, because they try to push, their agenda way more than that happens in Europe. So that might be one thing. I will grant that. But why do you think that it happens so much in the U.S.? Well, what do you think pushed those people to try to find those community?
Yeah, I'm not certain that doesn't. I can't speak. I guess I can't speak for the rest of the world. I don't know. And certainly, when you get to Canada, it's a lot less. It's a lot less. Well, I think it's hard because politics plays such a big role in all of this. It's easy to just think about politics, but when I was in Canada, I noticed that it was very hard for me to categorize people.
I know.
The mix of views is really broad. You can have somebody who tells you you're conservative, but then when you hear it as an American, you're like, wow, there's a whole bunch of views in there I don't associate with conservatism.
Man, I'm coming from Europe. It took me 5 years to actually have a grasp of what the hell you guys are doing over there with politics. And I'm still, on the fence of a lot of things. So yeah, I get it.
But I think in the U.S. it really has become much more polarized, and I think there's degrees within it, but obviously, with Trump and with, it's so hard not to talk about that aspect, but that really, it's just gotten worse and worse. I was just watching yesterday about the Supreme Court justices, and for Sandra Day O'Connor or something, it was 90-0 when she was voted for her seat on the court back in the 80s or whatever. Or I think that's right. But then only 3 Republicans voted for this recent judge, and so it's just, it used to be a thing where it wasn't about their whole it wasn't so polarized in terms of voting for the justices. If you were in the Senate, you could support a justice if they were qualified to be a justice, not dependent on whether they aligned with your political views or whatever. And so, anyway, I think I've gotten away from your point here. You're asking why
they try to do that?
Why are Americans pushing so hard to get into these tribes? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah. And especially,
why is it so segmented?
Yeah, and tribes that would make no sense.
I do think we're hitting a point with Christianity in the U.S. where those, I actually live in a fairly conservative neighborhood now, I think, and it's got a heavy military, near a military base, so there's a heavy military presence, and a lot of military are conservatives and kind of fall into NRA membership and other things like that, and tend to be can tend to be Christian, and I think in America, Christianity has been so kind of seeped into this nation that we're getting to the point, it's kind of, I don't want to call it the death throes, but the longer we go on, the more the generations are pushing back on it. And I think it's basically, it's not unlike, I guess what I'd say is it's not unlike back in 2008 or whatever, when there was all of this anti-gay marriage legislation, and trying to get ahead of the legalization of marriage. They were trying to basically insulate the institution by legislating what marriage was like, and it wasn't that was kind of the death throes of that. It seemed like they were getting all these big victories, but really it was because it was going to get overturned, it was going to happen, and there was this pushback that was happening that was causing the resistance basically by conservatives to all of a sudden propose this legislation before it became too late. And I think what you're seeing in America is you're seeing Christianity, like less and less people are calling themselves religious. Less and less people are calling themselves Christian.
Right.
And so you have a conservative Christian population that also happens to be rural versus urban. Like urban centers tend to be less Christian. The rural centers are. So you have that disparity. So it's all these compounding like conservative views with Christianity, with ruralism, with and so I think what you're seeing is that like as my kids are not Christian. I know a lot of Christian families who have kids who their kids have grown up to not be Christian. Mm-hmm. Seeing a generational change. We're seeing Christianity kind of losing its influence in politics, and so that has caused that 30 or 40% to become hyperactive, to become hyper polarized. And it's true with liberals too. I mean, you could talk about the social justice movement and that, like, they're equally like insulating. And now basically, that's part of the reason part of the reason that Ozzy's not really engaged anymore is that like it's very easy to like become a target and like to say something that is true and to say something that is actually properly bracketed and properly, but basically because you're saying anything that suggests anything bad about, like, let's say Black Lives Matter, for instance. Like, if you mention anything, you're potentially going to get canceled, right? Like, you're going to get a lot of flack. You're going to get a lot of people kind of looking to dick around with you and kind of fuck with you. And I think it's just as much on the left to blame as it is on the right. Like, and I think there's also, like, there's very little empathy between the two sides. There's very little I'm fortunate enough to have come from when in college I got seeped in conservative Christianity and fundamentalism. Mm-hmm. I came out of that, and I have a very, I think you've seen this over the years. I have a very charitable attitude towards Christians because I understand that they have reasons to believe the things that they believe. I think they're wrong about those, but it's not for no reason that they think the things they think. And so I don't want to like just call them idiots or whatever. I was persuaded by things, and I wasn't an idiot at the time, but I was mistaken, right? Mm-hmm. And so some of these people are mistaken, but we're completely unpersuasive when we basically treat them like they're stupid, right? Like or that they're liars, right? Like you hear this all the time with like that all preachers are liars. Well, you're like, no, they really believe those things. Right. They're mistaken.
Yeah,
that's very different from being a liar, right?
And this goes back, to what we were saying before about, trying to empathize with the person, and actually listening to what she has to say or the person has to say, not only argue. But you said something before that you touched on that, and I think from my non-US point of view might be one of the causes why it is so difficult. Because I think that one of the problems is that you managed to do something which it still blows my mind. That is basically to identify Christianity with capitalism, which is bonkers. So if you want to go against that kind of ideology, the only one which is left to you is socialism. But that's a stigma in the US. So basically, if you want to go against the church because of the things they sprout and all the thing, you are immediately identified as a socialist, which that basically means that you have leper. You're an outcast. Fuck you. Nobody's going to listen to you. So that I think is an issue. So listen, man. Let me switch gear a little bit because there is an argument, and I brought it down to you, which has been dear to me, and I've tried to have a conversation, or at least a thought from some people for as long as I remember. And I don't want to put pressure on you, but I had a really elaborate, speech about that, which I totally forgot. But again, I don't want to put pressure on you, but I tried to talk with Carneades.org and just said, listen, I have no fucking idea. I'm not prepared for that. I have no idea what it is. I tried with Alex Malpass, and also he said, no, it's out of my league. I have no idea. Ozzy, I think I tried with him, and he just said, "Are you shitting me?" No. So, the argument which is really dear to me
Oh man, I mean, the Carneades.org, Alex Malpass and Ozzy can't crack that nut. I'm pretty sure I'm ready to crack it.
I think listen, I
You've
think
come to the right place.
I,
Those idiots, you shouldn't even mess with them.
man, I think you are the right person, and you will
Sure.
understand why when I say that. So my beef is aesthetics.
Okay, yeah, aesthetics, yeah.
Uh, so, and my beef with, my desire of people having, telling me their thoughts about aesthetics, it came from a parallel that I did, many years ago, between aesthetics and morality. There was the big conversation about morality being objective or subjective, blah blah blah, blah stuff like that, and the consensus of the fact that it's subjective and all that shit. And then you got aesthetics, the sense of beauty. Sense of beauty is obviously something that everybody in his right mind to say, oh yeah, of course it's subjective. It is. How can it not be? I like what I like. You don't like what I like. Not exactly, because apparently, both psychologically and philosophically, there are concepts, there are things which, in general, appeal to the majority of the people as being more aesthetically pleasing or not.
Yeah.
They've changed through the times with the culture and all that shit, but there are some common things. And so, my big revelation moment was that, okay, listen, I'm more on the fact that morality is subjective or not. And there is still something which doesn't ring right, totally in my mind, but I get it. Now, why we cannot say about the same things about aesthetics, and what if morality and aesthetics, they share that commonality? There is a personal, factor, but there is also something else that we don't grasp exactly. We can only try to describe and agree upon, but we have no idea why. So, and the reason why I'm asking you is because of your work background. I mean, you have been involved in animation. So you see why I wanted to pass it to you, because you've been exposed to that.
Yeah. So let me say a few things about that. So first, because I think you had mentioned aesthetics the other day, and so I was anticipating this bit. So I've been kind of thinking about, and I haven't thought about it a lot. I wasn't like sitting there really preparing or anything. I didn't do any writing or anything.
Yeah.
But it was on the mind, and I think So I am. I'm just going to lay out a couple things. So I'm a moral realist. I believe that that there are objective truths about morality. I have a whole kind of. I don't want to get into that, but I have a whole reason I think that way. Then we could talk about then how does personal preference differ, right? Like the common example is like preference for chocolate ice cream. You like chocolate ice cream. I like vanilla ice cream. Is there an objective norm there that like one of us is in the wrong about, right? Like, because we talk about morality, we would say that if you think one thing and I think another thing about this moral topic, one of us is wrong, and I'm because I'm a moralist, I'm going to say it's objectively the case that Fabio is wrong about this, and he ought to do, let's say you've done something. It's either objectively the case that you should have done that or you shouldn't have done that, and there's a moral fact to the matter there, and so I think that. But then, is there a fact of the matter regarding like your personal preference for vanilla ice cream, whereas I like chocolate? Which one's better? I would say chocolate. You would say vanilla. So is there an objective? How does that deal with morality? Does that like morality? What I would say is that it's not like morality because it doesn't come down to a social interaction between us. It's not like there's some intentions, or like when we talk about morality, we're talking about my setting up kind of expectations in you, and you kind of communicating intentions to me, and I think that's where the tension is in moral talk. But when we talk about ice cream and chocolate ice cream versus vanilla ice cream, there's no there's no intentions conveyed there. There's no moral talk there. Like there's no moral consideration between you and me on that topic, right? So that's just personal preference. But it doesn't mean that it isn't objectively the case that you like chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream. I can't remember which I assigned to you. Vanilla ice cream. The facts about you are resonating with that vanilla ice cream in a way that you prefer it, and there's an underlying. It's not just random or whatever. There's an underlying like set of facts about the world that make it such that there's a reason that you like vanilla ice cream. It's because like your tastes and your mental experience when you taste this vanilla ice cream and what the feeling it gives you, of satisfaction or whatever.
Right.
I think that there's getting into talking about artwork and compositions and things. I have a whole lecture about color and composition in film, and
I knew you were my man. I knew that.
So and there are when I went to art school, I had a whole my first year I had this course called Color Concepts, and it was all about showing how concepts like contrast of value affect how your eye perceives and how it deals with a composition. Mm-hmm. You can direct a person through a composition by way of representing different values in a certain structure, or different shapes in a different structure, different hue relationships. So like if there's a strong contrast in hue, you're going to look there. So if you have a blue against a green, whereas if you have a field of green over here of differing saturation, that doesn't have a high contrast to it, you're not going to look there first. Like when you walk into a room, you don't look at an empty spot in the wall. Your eye goes to points of contrast because those are things that should be interested in. It's kind of, we've got this, we've got this wired into us a bit where we will look at points of contrast. You never just like all of a sudden look over at a wall and just stare at a blank spot. You like kind of go to the point of contrast, like a light switch or something. Yeah. And there's a reason why that has, like the reason I can have a color concepts course in my first year at college to learn how to direct someone's eyes, because our eyes and our perceptions work the same in all of us, right? There are people who break that norm. So for instance, autistic individuals may not notice people, like may not have, like I think they've done like, I remember seeing studies where they've done like eye tracking, like basically glance tracking of subjects, and a person will walk in a room with an autistic person kind of engaged in the experiment, and the autistic person won't notice the person coming in. Their eyes will not go to look at, and notice somebody coming in. Yeah. Because they see that person almost like any other object. It's the same as the light switch, as the lamp, as anything else. They don't have, there's a situation where or a state of affairs where they're placing value on looking at that is not within their wiring. They don't have that social awareness there. It's missing from their experience. Yeah. Whereas you and I, when we see a person walk into the room, we're that object to us, we perceive it. I don't want to say we perceive it differently, but we process it differently once we've perceived it. That's Fabio. He's a person. He's what are his intentions towards me? What are his expectations? And they may not have that whole experience. They may just not even notice that it's a person, and that's because there's a fact about them that is different. So it's objectively the case, like that they're going to value other things and not necessarily people. And it's
the same thing with perfectly symmetrical, things or faces, stuff like that. I mean, they can be okay, but they are hardly aesthetically pleasing because there's something wrong with that, right?
Yeah. So I guess what I'd say is that, like, the reason why I can have a color concepts course is because the majority of people, most people, have the same experience and have the same wiring and have the same underlying facts about how their brain works and how they've developed and what type of creature they are and whatnot. Ernie, my dog, cannot see you on screen. He doesn't notice people on screens. His aesthetics are very different from mine,
right?
Because he's a different animal altogether and has different ways of perceiving the world, different things that I have no clue what it's like. My wife and I have talked about, like, my dog, as I walk him, is smelling all over the place. I have no clue what that mapping of smells, how he. I don't know if there's a structural understanding that he has that is different from my experience, or does he map the world differently, or are there like I have no clue what it's like to be that, and
Right.
so what I'd say is that, but I do know what it's a little bit like to be like you, because you and I are kind of similar critters, right? Like we have a similar genetic kind of the things that explain us are similar, causally similar and whatnot. So I guess what I would say is that that um, I think aesthetics actually probably, I think those same, the same facts I would say that make it such that you see sharp objects the same way I see sharp objects, and we perceive, like when I look at a painting with sharp corners versus a painting with rounded corners throughout, or like a kind of a harsh graphic versus like a more subtle one. I think you and I are going to have a similar experience there, and I think that may be similar to moral facts about us, and like the way that
Right.
way I can say that you ought to do this. It's because you and I have a similar cause and explanation that has produced us such that there's a norm in terms of our interactions, and I think there's a norm in terms of what the common human experience of a sharp painting versus a soft painting is. And I think that
Right.
that's why I can have classes to learn to manipulate your eye through a composition, is because there is a fact of the matter between us. As I can predict how you're going to perceive that. Not everybody's going to perceive it that way, but
Right.
99% of the people are going to perceive it that way. People who don't perceive it that way are a very small fraction. And it's usually because of some other developmental issue or some other thing that has resulted in them just being different. And they may do other things well, and they may have, who knows, maybe there's benefits to being like them, but the majority of people are not like them.
Yeah, but you see, why I've been trying to push that kind of comparison between the two things, because there are some uncanny, resemblances between the two. I mean,
I'd say
there is the factor of the culture we live in. So now we might privilege some kind of aesthetics compared to other, but there's some things which are, I would say, eternal. You can take some Japanese painting or some Greek statues, and even if they differ a lot in both the style, the composition, the colors, there are some things that there is some underlying things, like the thing we talked about before, the sharp or the symmetry, stuff like that, which are through the aesthetic experience. So that might be it. I mean, I still find it's a good comparison with morals,
Right. What I would say is that there may be, like, I think it seems to me pretty obvious that the reason we don't like, or the reason that we pay more mind to like sharp edges and that there's a certain tension there. Like if I want to create tension in a composition, I could put like two sharp points right nearly touching each other. It's going to be very different than how you're going to perceive two circles right next to each other.
Right.
Like the tension is totally different. Probably related to the fact that like sharp things can hurt me and edges can hurt me and whatnot. Like I have an aversion or tension with sharp things. I'm aware of them, right? Versus like a ball in the room, I'm not going to worry about. But if like, let's say a child's walking around this room, I know the corner on the coffee table I need to be aware of. I don't care about the ball, right? Like I'm aware of the corner as that child's walking around. There's a tension there. And so I think that that's a healthy tension. And I think there is a norm there in terms of that, like it should be the case. I think we've developed that sensibility. I think that sensibility has a norm to it in that like you're probably going to survive longer with that tension than without it, or the number of people who will survive is going to be greater if they have that tension than if they don't have it. Because if they don't have it, potentially they're going to have some harm to them, or there's going to be harm to their children or other things like that. So I think to aesthetics there is a norm that derives why we have certain feelings about visual appearances or music or other things. There may be a trace back, but I think I think the reason we don't deal with aesthetics the same way we deal with morals and say that you ought, you should prefer this or whatever, is I
Oh,
think
right.
that
Yeah.
there isn't those norms aren't there's you not liking a painting or having or disagreeing with me that a painting is beautiful doesn't have consequence to our interactions, at least
Oh,
for the
no,
most
no,
part.
no.
I might question your judgment or something like that, but I don't think that we don't talk about norms and oughts and
Right.
like we don't talk about it the same way we do moral talk, because for us aesthetics and culture have to some degree grown beyond that kind of like that more base survival and stuff like
Oh, no, no, no. I mean, I totally agree with you. My only, again, well, not concern, but what made me think is that, what I said before, when we talk about aesthetics, nobody, would say, oh, you have to like that painting, right? You must like that painting. There's something wrong with you if you don't like that painting, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of it, there are some paintings that everybody kind of like. More or less, but I kind of like, and sometimes to me, I feel, there is a powerful parallel, with moral facts. With moral facts, we constantly interact, and we constantly discuss, you ought to do that. Well, you shouldn't do that. But there are some things that we kind of feel, on the same page-ish, all of them, and then we just bicker with the details. So that's why I thought, it's always been something that I think it was kind of, put on the side of the conversation, and I think that, especially in the moral discourse, might have been like an interesting angle to approach.
Yeah.
Instead of going directly with, okay, this is what's different between my moral facts and your moral facts, and let's, discuss until we're blue in the face. That's kind of pointless.
If I didn't care more than words can say, if I didn't care, would I feel this way?